Your soulmate's ex is now in police custody. The truth is finally out. Don't scroll away just yet, because what you're about to hear is not a story about revenge. It is a story about how the truth can remain hidden for a long time before everything suddenly changes. Somewhere, at this very moment, a chapter that has influenced your soulmate's life for far too long is finally coming to an end. For months, or perhaps even years, confusion surrounded situations that never seemed to make sense. Your soulmate tried to move forward, but something from the past kept pulling them backward. Every time they thought they were finally free, another secret, another lie, or another unexpected problem appeared. Many people believed the story they were told. Very few stopped to ask whether it was actually true. But the truth has one remarkable quality: it never disappears forever. It waits quietly until the right moment arrives. That moment may feel sudden to everyone watching from the outside, but in reality it has been building for a very long time. According to what your soulmate has recently learned, authorities have stepped into a situation involving someone from their past, and that single event has started revealing details that had been hidden beneath fear, manipulation, and silence. Whether every rumor is accurate or not is less important than one undeniable reality: secrets are no longer staying buried. As people begin talking, old conversations are being remembered, forgotten details are returning, and pieces that once seemed unrelated are finally fitting together. Your soulmate never wanted their life to become a battle against someone's past. They simply wanted peace. They wanted a future that wasn't controlled by old arguments, emotional games, or constant uncertainty. Yet whenever they tried to build that future, something always seemed to interrupt it. Now they are beginning to understand why. Sometimes the greatest obstacle is not distance or bad timing. Sometimes it is a hidden truth that has not yet come into the light. If you have been wondering why everything felt delayed, this may be the beginning of your answer. Not because another person's hardship should be celebrated, but because honesty creates the possibility of healing. When hidden actions are finally examined, people are no longer forced to live inside confusion. They can make decisions based on reality instead of assumptions. That is where real freedom begins. As this chapter unfolds, your soulmate is realizing something important: the future cannot be built on fear. It must be built on trust, honesty, and the courage to leave behind everything that no longer belongs in their life. The days ahead may still include difficult conversations and emotional moments, but for the first time in a long while, those conversations are moving toward clarity instead of deeper confusion. The truth does not always arrive comfortably, but it often arrives at exactly the right time. And when it does, it gives people the chance to stop looking over their shoulder and finally begin walking toward a future that is no longer controlled by the shadows of the past. As the first wave of shocking news settled, your soulmate found themselves sitting in complete silence, not because they felt victorious, but because they finally understood that the weight they had been carrying for so long was never meant to stay with them forever. For years, they had questioned their own judgment. They replayed conversations in their mind, wondering if they had missed something important or trusted the wrong people at the wrong time. Every unanswered question slowly became an emotional burden. Every delay made them wonder if peace would ever return. But the recent developments changed more than the headlines surrounding someone from their past. They changed the way your soulmate saw their own story. For the first time, they realized that many of the obstacles standing between them and a peaceful future were not created by destiny. They were created by deception, fear, and choices that eventually caught up with reality. As more information became known, old assumptions began falling apart. People who once accepted one version of events without question started recognizing that every story has more than one side. Some felt surprised. Others felt regret for judging too quickly. A few quietly admitted they should have listened more carefully from the beginning. Yet your soulmate was no longer interested in proving anyone wrong. They had reached the point where protecting their peace mattered more than winning an argument. That quiet shift became the beginning of true healing. Imagine carrying a heavy backpack every day for years without realizing how much it was slowing you down. The moment you finally put it down, you notice how much lighter every step feels. That is exactly what this season became for your soulmate. The burden of constantly defending themselves, explaining the past, or living beneath someone else's shadow slowly began disappearing. The truth did not erase every painful memory, but it removed the confusion surrounding those memories. And clarity has a remarkable power. It allows people to stop questioning themselves and start trusting what they have learned. Your soulmate also began thinking about the future in a different way. Instead of asking, "Why did this happen to me?" they started asking, "What have I learned because of this?" That single change opened the door to hope. Difficult experiences often leave behind unexpected wisdom. They teach people to recognize genuine character instead of empty promises. They teach patience when life refuses to move according to personal plans. Most importantly, they teach that real love cannot survive where manipulation and dishonesty continue to grow. Looking back, your soulmate realized there were warning signs they ignored because they wanted to believe the best in everyone. While kindness is a beautiful quality, wisdom reminds us that trust should be built over time through consistent actions. This lesson was painful, but it became one of the most valuable gifts hidden inside a difficult chapter. As the days continued, something else changed. Conversations became calmer. The fear of hidden surprises slowly faded. Instead of constantly expecting another crisis, your soulmate found themselves imagining possibilities they had almost forgotten. They remembered what it felt like to hope without hesitation. They remembered what it felt like to dream without expecting disappointment. Those small changes mattered more than anyone else realized because healing rarely arrives through one dramatic event. It grows quietly through ordinary moments where fear slowly loses its influence. If your own heart has ever carried similar questions, let this remind you that truth has its own timing. It cannot always be rushed, but it also cannot remain hidden forever. When reality finally comes into the light, you gain something more valuable than answers: you gain freedom. Freedom to stop reliving yesterday. Freedom to make wiser decisions. Freedom to build relationships based on honesty instead of uncertainty. The chapter surrounding your soulmate's past is not remembered because of scandal alone. It is remembered because it marked the moment when confusion finally gave way to clarity, and when a future that once seemed impossible suddenly became believable again. The days that followed were unlike anything your soulmate had expected. News continued spreading, but with every new conversation they became less interested in public opinion and more focused on finding personal peace. For so long they had lived beneath the weight of unanswered questions that they almost forgot what emotional freedom felt like. Now, as hidden details slowly came into the open, they realized that truth does not always arrive to embarrass people. Sometimes it arrives to release those who have been trapped inside confusion for far too long. There were moments when your soulmate looked back on the past and wondered whether they should have recognized the warning signs sooner. They remembered promises that sounded convincing but were never matched by actions. They remembered excuses that seemed believable until later events revealed a completely different reality. Those memories were painful, but they also became valuable lessons. Experience has a way of teaching wisdom that no advice can ever fully replace. Your soulmate began understanding that genuine trust is not built through dramatic words or emotional pressure. It grows slowly through honesty, consistency, and respect. As investigators continued their work and more verified information became available, many assumptions people once accepted without question started falling apart. Individuals who had remained silent suddenly found the courage to speak. Details that had once seemed unimportant became meaningful pieces of a much larger picture. Yet through all of this, your soulmate made one important decision. They refused to allow someone else's mistakes to define the rest of their own life. That choice became more powerful than any headline. Imagine standing inside a room with broken mirrors all around you. Every reflection shows a different version of reality, making it impossible to know which image is true. Then someone opens the curtains, allowing natural light to enter. The mirrors remain, but the light makes it easier to recognize what is real and what is only distortion. That is what clarity feels like after a long season of emotional uncertainty. It does not change the past, but it changes the way you understand it. With every passing day, your soulmate felt a growing desire to leave bitterness behind. Carrying anger required too much energy, and they had already given enough of their life to pain. Instead, they chose to invest their attention in healing, rebuilding trust with those who had remained loyal, and creating a future no longer controlled by fear. They discovered that forgiveness is not pretending harmful actions never happened. It is deciding that those actions will not continue stealing tomorrow's peace. That realization changed everything. Friends began noticing a quiet confidence returning to your soulmate. Their conversations sounded different. Their decisions became calmer. Instead of reacting to every rumor, they waited for verified facts. Instead of expecting disappointment, they slowly allowed themselves to believe that better days were possible. Those changes were not dramatic, but they were real. True transformation often happens quietly, one thoughtful decision at a time. If your own heart has been waiting for answers in a difficult season, remember this: not every delay is meaningless. Sometimes life is protecting you until the full picture becomes visible. Sometimes the truth takes longer because every missing piece must find its proper place before lasting clarity can emerge. Your soulmate now understands that the greatest victory was never seeing hidden matters revealed. The greatest victory was discovering that honesty, patience, and integrity survived every challenge. Those qualities became the foundation upon which the next chapter of life would be built. Looking ahead, there will still be moments requiring courage. Healing is a journey, not a single event. But every step forward now carries something that was missing before: confidence born from truth. And once truth becomes the foundation, fear gradually loses the power it once held, making room for peace, wisdom, stronger relationships, and a future that no longer lives beneath the shadow of yesterday. As the weeks passed, the noise surrounding the investigation slowly began to fade, but the impact it left behind continued shaping every decision your soulmate made. They realized that the loudest headlines rarely tell the whole story. Real healing happens after everyone else stops watching, when a person is finally alone with their thoughts and must decide whether to remain trapped in yesterday or begin building tomorrow. Your soulmate chose tomorrow. That decision was not easy. There were moments when painful memories returned without warning. A familiar place, an old photograph, or a simple conversation could bring back emotions they believed had already disappeared. Yet every time those memories appeared, they reminded themselves of one important truth: the past could explain who they had been, but it no longer had the authority to decide who they would become. That quiet decision became stronger every day. As official facts continued replacing rumors, people who had once spoken with complete confidence suddenly became much quieter. Assumptions gave way to evidence, and speculation gave way to reality. Some apologized for believing stories too quickly. Others avoided the subject entirely because they were uncomfortable admitting they had been wrong. Your soulmate did not chase those apologies. They understood that peace does not come from making everyone agree with you. It comes from knowing the truth and refusing to let bitterness take control of your heart. Imagine carrying an old key in your pocket for years without knowing which door it opens. One day you discover the door, turn the key, and realize it unlocks not a prison cell, but the exit. The key had always been there. You simply had not reached the right moment to use it. Truth often works in the same way. It does not always arrive as dramatic victory. Sometimes it quietly opens the door that allows you to walk away from fear forever. That is exactly what began happening in your soulmate's life. Instead of constantly looking behind them, they started paying attention to what was waiting ahead. They rebuilt relationships with people who had stood beside them during difficult times. They became more careful about whom they trusted, yet they refused to become cold or cynical. They learned that wisdom and kindness can exist together. One protects the heart, while the other keeps it open to genuine love and meaningful friendships. Looking back, they realized that the greatest damage caused by deception was not only the confusion it created. It was the way it made them question their own instincts. Rebuilding that inner confidence became one of the most important parts of healing. Every small decision made with honesty restored a little more trust in themselves. Every peaceful day reminded them that chaos was no longer their normal reality. If you have ever experienced a season where someone else's actions disrupted your peace, let this part of the story remind you that your future does not have to remain connected to their mistakes. You cannot rewrite yesterday, but you can choose what lessons you carry into tomorrow. Carry wisdom instead of resentment. Carry courage instead of fear. Carry hope instead of endless suspicion. These choices may seem small today, but over time they become the foundation of a completely different life. Your soulmate also discovered that genuine freedom begins when you stop waiting for perfect closure. Not every question receives a complete answer. Not every person accepts responsibility. Yet healing remains possible because it does not depend entirely upon someone else's actions. It begins the moment you decide your peace is too valuable to surrender again. As another chapter opened before them, your soulmate felt something they had not experienced in a long time, a quiet confidence that tomorrow no longer needed to resemble yesterday. The investigation had revealed facts, but the greater transformation happened inside their own heart. They no longer defined themselves by betrayal, confusion, or disappointment. Instead, they defined themselves by resilience, integrity, compassion, and the determination to keep moving forward with wisdom. That became the true turning point of the story. The greatest victory was never another person's downfall. It was the rediscovery of hope, the return of inner peace, and the realization that a future built upon honesty will always stand stronger than one built upon fear or deception. The final chapter was never meant to end with anger. It was always meant to end with understanding. As the investigation reached its conclusion and verified facts replaced months of uncertainty, your soulmate realized that the greatest burden had never been another person's actions alone. The greatest burden had been living without clarity. Once that clarity arrived, everything else began changing from the inside out. The fear that had followed them for so long slowly lost its influence. The constant need to question every memory disappeared. Instead of replaying painful conversations, they found themselves imagining a future that no longer depended on yesterday's mistakes. For the first time in a long while, they felt free to breathe without expecting another hidden surprise around the corner. That feeling was worth more than any explanation they had been searching for. Looking back, they understood that every difficult season had quietly shaped them into someone stronger, wiser, and more compassionate. They no longer wished they could erase the past. They simply refused to let it define the rest of their life. As the people around them slowly accepted the truth, some apologized, others remained silent, and a few chose to walk away. Your soulmate no longer chased anyone's approval because they had discovered something far more valuable: peace within themselves. They realized that healing does not begin when everyone agrees with your version of events. Healing begins when your heart no longer depends on their agreement to move forward. Imagine watching the final clouds disappear after days of heavy rain. The sky does not celebrate. It simply becomes clear again. In the same way, your soulmate did not celebrate another person's downfall. They simply welcomed the return of peace. They chose to focus on rebuilding trust, strengthening healthy relationships, and creating a life where honesty would never again be treated as a weakness. They promised themselves that every future decision would be guided by integrity instead of fear. Every new friendship would be built slowly through consistent actions rather than empty promises. Every important relationship would be protected by open communication instead of hidden secrets. Those promises became the true beginning of a new chapter. If this story has reminded you of your own journey, remember one simple truth: difficult chapters do not exist only to bring pain. They also reveal strength you never knew you possessed. They teach you to recognize genuine character. They teach you that peace is not found in revenge but in freedom from the past. They remind you that truth may take time, but once it arrives, it becomes the strongest foundation upon which a better tomorrow can be built. Your soulmate now walks forward carrying lessons instead of bitterness, wisdom instead of fear, and hope instead of endless doubt. Whatever the future holds, they know they cannot control every circumstance, but they can always choose honesty, compassion, and courage. Those choices will continue opening doors that deception could never unlock. And perhaps that is the real ending of this story. Not that someone from the past faced consequences, but that your soulmate finally discovered the confidence to leave the past where it belongs. The shadows no longer decide the direction of their life. The truth has already spoken. The lessons have already been learned. The future is no longer waiting for permission to begin. It is already unfolding one peaceful step at a time, inviting every sincere heart to walk forward with wisdom, resilience, and faith that brighter days are always possible after even the darkest seasons. As one chapter closes forever, another opens with quiet hope, reminding us that while secrets eventually fade, honesty endures, healing grows, and every sunrise offers another opportunity to build a life defined not by fear or deception, but by truth, dignity, and lasting peace. This is not the end of love. It is the end of confusion. It is the end of carrying burdens that never truly belong to you. From this moment onward, let every step be guided by clarity, every decision by integrity, and every dream by the confidence that no hidden shadow has the power to stop a future built on truth. The morning that followed felt different. Nothing extraordinary had happened overnight, yet everything seemed quieter inside your soulmate's heart. For the first time in a long while, they woke without the constant pressure of wondering what hidden problem would appear next. The truth had already begun doing what it always does. It separated facts from fear. Although many questions had finally been answered, your soulmate understood that healing would not happen in a single day. It would happen through many ordinary days filled with small, intentional choices. Every choice to remain calm instead of reacting in anger. Every choice to trust wisdom instead of rumors. Every choice to protect peace instead of reopening old wounds. Those quiet decisions became the real foundation of a new beginning. As more verified information became public, people who once believed only one side of the story slowly started changing their perspective. Some admitted they had judged too quickly. Others realized they had overlooked warning signs that now seemed obvious. Yet your soulmate refused to spend precious time proving who had been right all along. They had learned that life becomes lighter when you stop trying to convince everyone and instead focus on living with integrity. That lesson brought freedom. Every step forward reminded them that yesterday's confusion no longer had the authority to control tomorrow's possibilities. They began rebuilding their routine, reconnecting with supportive people, and allowing themselves to dream again without expecting disappointment around every corner. There were still moments when old memories returned, but those memories no longer carried the same weight. Instead of reopening pain, they served as reminders of how far they had already come. Looking back, your soulmate realized that the greatest transformation had happened quietly inside. They had become stronger without becoming bitter, wiser without becoming cold, and more careful without losing the ability to care deeply about others. Those changes mattered more than any public outcome because they would shape every future relationship they built. If someone new entered their life, that connection would now rest on honesty instead of assumptions, respect instead of control, and patience instead of pressure. Imagine climbing a mountain during heavy fog. Every step feels uncertain because the destination cannot be seen. Then the clouds slowly disappear, revealing not only the path behind you but also the breathtaking view ahead. The mountain was always there. Your progress was always real. Only your vision was limited for a time. That is exactly how your soulmate now sees this chapter. They no longer measure their journey by the pain they experienced but by the strength they discovered while walking through it. And if there is one lasting message this entire story leaves behind, it is this: truth may arrive slowly, but when it finally stands in the light, it gives sincere hearts the freedom to stop surviving and start living again. From this moment forward, your soulmate chooses peace over conflict, wisdom over resentment, and hope over fear, believing that the best chapters of life are written not by the mistakes of the past, but by the courage to move beyond them with honesty, resilience, and a heart finally ready for a brighter future.